The world became blurry as I sat on the bedroom floor. I felt completely exhausted and empty. Until recently, I would never have imagined that I would find myself in this situation. Now, as I sat, I could feel the texture of the carpet under my hands. Kelly and I once spent a lot of money decorating this room. I closed my eyes for a moment, shaking my head slightly in an attempt to clear the fog in my head. I wondered how I got to this life. Is this really me? Opening my eyes, I looked at the large wooden bed. Thoughts of Kelly immediately struck through me. I cringed, realizing that all this would never happen again. Events got out of control. As I lowered my hands, I noticed a whiskey bottle and an empty pill bottle on the bed. The room smelled of alcohol. I smiled bitterly, but immediately thought with alarm about the letters lying on the bedside table. There was always a risk that the wrong person would find them. I felt approaching nausea and tried to control it. Why did everything have to happen this way? There were probably people I would miss, but I doubt they would miss me. My daughter would probably hate me for such an act, but it seems that she has already hated me. I just couldn't stand the pain anymore. My thoughts were confused. At the last moment, I realized my stupidity and tried to cling to life. But I could no longer change anything. Darkness has swallowed me. A week earlier, I laughed happily as he circled his daughter Grace around our country house in the center of Perth, Australia. She was 19 and her boyfriend, John, had proposed to her the night before. Of course, I knew this would happen. He found me and asked me privately if I would give my blessing. I did this without any reservations. Grace and John had been dating since 8th grade in high school, and I could count on one hand the number of times they weren't together, at some point, every weekend, since they started dating. Grace told my wife Kelly and me about this offer. John sent her on a treasure hunt, took her around the city, and then sat her under a tree in Kings Park, where he proposed to her. I hugged her and spun her around as if she were 5 years old when the next day they told us about it in the kitchen. I was so happy for them. Although they were young, I knew their love was strong. I believed that if there was a young couple in our time who would have the courage to unite their lives, then I believed that it was them. I grabbed my daughter's hand again and smiled as I looked at the engagement ring. "This is wonderful, Gracie." I looked at John. "You did well to choose her." My wife Kelly snorted, sitting on the other side of the kitchen counter. At 42 years old, Kelly was still, in my eyes, a beautiful woman. She was a striking brunette, with brown hair, brown eyes, and a tanned complexion that many women dream of. We all turned to watch as she snorted at my compliment. "You should pass some of this gratitude on to me," my wife said, raising her glass of wine. "You may have blessed them, but I helped John choose her." I was shocked and noticed John blushing bright red. "Mom, that was inappropriate," Grace said, then turned to her fiancé. "It's okay, baby. I love it, and I know you made the final choice." Nothing more was said, but I have to admit that I felt a little embarrassed by Kelly's comment. In all the years we've been together, I've never seen my wife say anything so disrespectful and out of character to embarrass everyone in the room. But then again, if you think about it a little, Kelly has been a little weird these past few months. Nothing that I could put my finger on at that moment, but there were little things, comments and actions that, while not natural to the loving woman I knew, seeped into the woman who had just embarrassed us. Dinner was a celebratory affair as we continued to toast and celebrate the couple's engagement. Then finally, Grace and John headed home after dessert of the apple crumble and vanilla cream I had made earlier in the day. They had a small 2-room apartment which they rented with our help while they were studying and making a career. That night, as Kelly and I snuggled in bed, I didn't say anything to her, but I have to admit that this inappropriate comment haunted me. Sunday morning, Kelly and I slowly woke up. Something happened that really shocked me. She behaved very rudely, refusing me physical relations. It took me about half an hour to come to my senses. I was so shocked. I showered and shaved, and when I came out into the kitchen, Kelly was gone. She just left a note saying she was leaving. Suddenly, I got angry. In all the years I've known Kelly, she's never been this way towards me, disrespect like this morning. I had no idea what was happening to my wife. I made myself some coffee and kept coming back to the same question. Is she cheating on me? I was finishing my coffee, thinking about this, when I got a call from Roger, one of my closest friends. "Hey, Bart, how are you?" He chirped. I didn't say anything other than the usual greeting. "Bart, buddy, what happened? Is something wrong?" asked Roger. I spent the next 10 minutes explaining my thoughts to Roger. Roger laughed at me. "Mate, if she's cheating on you, there's not much you can do. Divorce is 50-50, and she doesn't work either, so she'll completely fleece you," he said. "It doesn't console me," I answered, a little angry at his attitude. "I wasn't trying to console, I was trying to be realistic," said the very sensitive Roger. "Look, why don't we sit down and talk about this at work tomorrow? We must prepare a report on the Pembroke project. After that, we can discuss everything." "Sounds interesting," I replied, without much enthusiasm. Roger was not only a good friend, but we also worked for the same company. I was the senior engineer and he was the program manager. Over the years, we built a good team. I developed solutions and he managed the funds and schedule. Somehow, I survived Sunday. Kelly returned home, but it was almost midnight when she slipped into bed. She didn't say anything, although she knew I was awake. The next day, Kelly tried to be gentle. "That won't happen, Kelly," I said, getting out of bed. "Do you say no to sex?" she asked, looking at me incredulously. I stared at her, then began to put on my day suit. "I won't touch you after you disrespected me last weekend. I swear if you cheat on me—" I fell silent, having no idea how to finish the thought. Kelly was instantly in front of my nose. "You will do it, Bartholomew. There's no way in hell you can refuse." There was a slight grin on her face when she said my full name. It softened a little, but did not completely disappear from the face. "Listen, go back to bed. I need to relax a little, and I'm sure you need it too." She tried to persuade me. I shook my head. Who the hell was this woman? "No, that won't happen, Kelly. I don't think you understand the absolute contempt you show me." "Well, then fuck you," she said, and returned to bed. I shook my head and left the room. For the first time in 21 years of marriage, I felt disgusted with my wife. That morning in the office, I couldn't find a place for myself. My assistant, Myra, looked at me worriedly. "Bart, are you okay?" "You don't seem to be yourself," she said, worried written on her forehead. Myra Brown was my work assistant for 10 years. When she talks about this, she likes to say that she was hired out of mercy. When Myra came to work at the company, her boyfriend abused her. After breaking up with him, Myra had to leave home, taking only her clothes and her 1-year-old daughter, Tilly. She came to the interview with a black eye, desperately applying for a secretary position. Apart from a black eye that quickly disappeared during the interview, Myra was well suited for the job. Overall, she dressed conservatively, but it was hard to hide the fact that she was stunning in terms of appearance. I have to admit that over the years, she caught me looking at her a couple of times, but she never said anything. Myra was very smart. She did most of the things we did with ease, and aside from getting knocked up by her abusive ex-boyfriend one night at a drunken party, she was as witty as anyone around her. The owner of the company hired her, but assigned her to me, feeling that otherwise the hiring Mary having the brains to keep up with me when I was working on implementing projects would be wasted. I respected Myra because she had a genuine concern for everyone around her and an absolute moral code. She treated you friendly until you pestered her, and then you were dead to her. People were fired from the company because they harassed her, assuming she was just a stupid beauty, only to find out that her anger was not to be trifled with. I looked at Myra, deciding what to say about my situation with Kelly. Finally, I sighed and told her the truth. A few moments after the story began, Myra frowned. But by the end of my story, her neck was covered with an angry blush. I hung my head after telling my story, somewhat depressed that my wife was most likely cheating on me. "I don't know what to do, Myra. I mean, if she's cheating on me, I never imagined it," I said sadly. Suddenly, I felt Myra's hand on my shoulder. In all the years we worked together, I could count on both hands the number of physical contacts we had. I looked into a pair of sympathetic eyes. "Well," said Myra, "first you need to go through the meeting at Pembroke. A few minutes ago, I received a work schedule. There are some questions about the pipes and concrete used in the structure. At that moment, I felt like I was going back to work." "What? Why is this the first time I've heard about this?" "Roger didn't tell me anything," I replied. Several wheels began to turn in my head around the structures, architectural layouts, and volumes that I had planned. Myra looked worried. "I don't know why nothing was said, Bart. I just saw the agenda, and it's disturbing." A moment later, before we had time to think about it, Roger poked his head into my office. "Are you ready, buddy?" he asked, looking at me with a smile plastered on his face. "Roger, what are these problems with pipes and concrete at the Pembroke project?" I asked quietly, trying to prepare for the upcoming meeting. He shrugged it off with a wave of his hand. "Do not worry about it. We'll figure it out right now." "Roger, you know I like to know these things before meeting a client," I said. "It's okay, buddy. We'll figure it out," Roger replied, in a very dismissive tone. The meeting was an ambush. We entered. The owners of Pembroke were already there. I met them several times, and they were always friendly. However, when I explained our progress, they frowned, and as I spoke, their looks became darker and darker. "But what about the overuse of concrete and pipes in the Northeast?" asked Peter, the majority owner and CEO. I looked at Roger. He shrugged without saying anything. Everyone was looking at me. "I'll have to look into this because I haven't heard anything about cost overruns. However, as of last week, there were reports that everything was within normal parameters." The frown on Peter's face deepened. "This cannot be. Can you tell me why I signed bid reports for the last 3 months totaling over $200,000 for additional concrete and pipes?" Peter said, looking at me. I stared at him, not knowing what to answer. I looked back at Roger. His face was blank, but he took out a folder and stood up. "Gentlemen, if you could let us look into this, I'm sure we can figure it out." He looked at me. "Bart, let's go out for a minute and figure it out." I followed Roger down the hall into another room where our boss, Clarence, was waiting for us. "So, what did they say?" Clarence asked when we sat down. Roger intervened before I could say anything. He handed the folder to Clarence. "They asked about the missing materials, as we suspected," Roger replied. Clarence looked at me, and for the first time in all the years of working for him, I saw anger in his eyes, directed at me. "What can you say, Bartholomew?" The elderly man almost spat at me. I was shocked by the intensity of the tone and the hostile look he gave me. "I don't know what to say, sir. The reports I received last week stated that everything was going according to plan, no additional materials were required, and I had no idea about these signed applications. I certainly didn't approve of them," I responded to the clearly angry boss, feeling like this was all getting out of control. He looked at me critically and opened the folder Roger had given him. "So, this is the version you adhere to?" Clarence said decisively. "Sir?" I asked. Then I looked at Roger. He looked serious. "Bartholomew, I have application forms here for $206,000. The problem I have is that the payments were made to a bank account that turned out to be in your name. Bartholomew, is this how you feel about me after all these years?" Clarence almost shouted at me. After this, the meeting was interrupted. Both Clarence and Roger took turns berating me for what they said I had done. None of them wanted to hear about my innocence. They then brought in a HR representative, and I was summarily fired for fraud. Clarence told me that he took it to the police, and to top it all off, Myra was also fired because she might have been involved in this, working so close to me. As I was led out of the premises with my few meager belongings, I saw Roger grinning after me when he decided I wasn't looking. I caught Myra in the parking lot out front, with security watching us, to make sure we didn't try to come back. She looked stunned, but cried standing by her car. "Myra, are you okay?" I asked. She turned sharply to me. "You bastard Bartholomew, a fraud of $200,000. How could you? I trusted you, and you deprived me of my job." The upset and devastated woman shouted at me. "Myra, it wasn't me," I pleaded. "Is it not?" She paused. Irritation appeared on her face. Before they kicked me out the door, Roger showed me the signed applications. I saw your signature, and I know your signature. How could you? She looked at me again. I noticed hatred in her eyes directed solely at me. She didn't want to hear that I had nothing to do with this. And I guess that sob story about Kelly was just a lie, too, when you told me she was cheating on you. Seriously? Do you think I don't see the looks you give me when you think I don't see? Once again, a look of pure, unadulterated anger caught me off guard with a woman I had worked with for 10 years. I hate you, she spat at me. You ruined all my chances of getting another job. Honestly, I can't believe I got sucked into feeling sorry for you. You lie, cheat, and steal, and then you dare to ask me how I feel. Fuck you, Bart. In all the years of our work together, I have never heard her swear. Hearing her words again, I was shocked. But before I could say or do anything, she hit me hard. You ruined my career, I can't get a reference, and what's worse, I'm tainted by your fraud. I hope it was all worth it to you, asshole. I stood there stunned, my cheek burning from her rather forceful slap. Myra stared at me for a moment longer before she got into her car and drove away without another word. I didn't know what else I could do, so I drove home and parked in the driveway. Kelly was waiting for me inside. So the deceived husband comes home with his tail between his legs. You are pathetic. She spat. I didn't notice it at the time, but in the days that followed, I wondered why Kelly seemed happy. Not upset or worried, but happy. What the heck? Kelly, I didn't do any of this. I do not know what's going on, I said, depressed and confused, feeling like I was breaking down. She grinned at me. Who cares, Bart? Now I'm telling you that I'm leaving your ass. I've never seen such a contemptuous look before, not even a facial expression, Mary. It wasn't like that. There was a knock on the door. This is for you, she said, still growling at me. Without thinking twice, I opened the door to a guy in a suit. Mr. Bartholomew. Another? He asked. I nodded. You have been served. He handed me a thick manila envelope and left. I looked into the envelope and pulled out a divorce petition. Kelly, divorce? Feeling like my world was crumbling even more. Kelly sensed my growing distress and happily laughed at my pain. You're such an ignorant dumbass, aren't you? But of course, this is a scam. In case you haven't noticed, I've been dating someone for the last 6 months. He's gone places you haven't, he's exciting, and of course he has a decent amount of money. She looked at me like I was something that you scrape it off from your shoe. As for you, you no longer have a job, family, or friends. And let's not forget that before the end of the month, you will most likely end up in prison for fraud. She glanced quickly at me, sadistic pleasure in her eyes. I've seen this look grow over the past few months. I didn't understand why I only saw this now. You're pathetic, Bart. So that's it. Do you admit that you are a whore, a cheating woman of easy virtue? I said, and a note of anger crept into my voice. So yesterday and today you just had fun and you didn't care about me? Kelly laughed. Yes, it was all connected with me. I deserve it all. Haven't you noticed that this has always been the case for me? She looked at me, and for a moment I thought there was a flicker of sadness in her eyes. We really had many good years together. The look passed and the bitch returned. But I'm done with you, Bart, so I'm moving on. Kelly leaned closer to me as my world continued to crumble. Listen, Bart, make it easier to give me a task. I ask for a house and most of the property because you will be in prison. So, sign the papers. I'm being generous to you, giving you a week to pack up your stuff and move out. But by early next week, get out of this house, or I'll add a restraining order on top of everything else. So you're staying with your lover? I asked, feeling the weight of all the betrayal from my now former job, and now from my wife. She laughed again. Of course, his apartment is much smaller, which is why we are going to get this place as soon as you are in prison. But don't bother following me, or I'll call the police. You will be arrested for this, and you will now go to prison. Don't add anything to it. I pulled out a chair and sat down, depressed and rejected. Kelly took a few steps towards me. She then noticed the glowing red handprint that Myra had left there earlier. She looked at my reddened cheek and smiled. Well, at least this girl was fired too. Go take advantage, go to the hole and die, Bartholomew. And with that, Kelly walked out. I did nothing for the rest of the day, not even drinking. The next day I didn't know what to do either. I was waiting for something. I tried to call Grace, but she sent the call to voicemail. After about the 20th ring, she picked up the phone. "What do you want?" My daughter's voice sounded abruptly. "Grace, I began to say. "Leave it, Father." Grace interrupted me. Her tone was sharp, almost sarcastic. "Mom told me everything about your cheating, about your lies, about the fact that you had an affair with your assistant. Seriously, cheating on my mom and stealing $200,000. You have ruined many lives because of this, and I can say that, in my entire life, I have never been so disappointed in anyone." I didn't know what to say. For a moment, nothing was said between us. But just as I was about to catch my breath and defend myself, Grace interrupted me again. "Listen, I'll be honest," Grace told me hotly on the phone. "John and I don't want anything to do with you. Last night you were on the news as someone the police were investigating. Then your mom called and told me everything. Go to jail, Dad, outside your time, and stay away from us. I'm not proud to say this, but unless you're in jail, when we get married, don't come to the wedding. I don't want someone who can destroy this family so much to be next to me on my happiest day. I'll find someone else to walk me down the aisle." I didn't say anything as tears streamed down my face. "Dad, are you listening? Do you realize how badly you've ruined everything?" I didn't say anything, but she heard my sobs. "Goodbye, Dad. From now on, you are dead to me. Don't ever try to contact me again, and I mean never." Her tone was final, and she hung up without saying another word. After these words, I fell to the floor and cried. 2 days later, the police showed up at my door, arrested me, and took me in for questioning. The detectives who arrested me didn't bother to ask me if I did it. Instead, they just kept asking me question after question about where I was hiding the money, who my partners were, how long I had been defrauding my former firm. In the end, they let me go home, but told me not to leave the city since I had to appear in court next week. I walked into my house, looking around at everything. The pictures of Kelly, Grace, and me on the walls, the art we bought, the trophies Grace had brought home over the years for her school sports accomplishments. So many memories and good times now seemed empty and meaningless. The past week passed in a blur. Deep inside, I knew that I was missing something in this whole situation. I knew I wasn't connecting the obvious dots, but other than the fact that I was innocent, I just had no idea. My wife left me. My daughter disowned me. I was fired from my job. My assistant blamed me. Even a close friend treated me like crap and never bothered to contact me. The few calls I answered were calls from former friends expressing their disappointment in me. The scenario repeated itself multiple times where they asked me to never contact them again. I walked into the bedroom defeated, with no idea what my next steps would be. As an engineer, I solved problems, but I didn't know what problem I was solving right now. After showering, I went downstairs and ate a sandwich with stale bread and jam. The cardboard-tasting food only made my already gloomy life worse. I think I could have gotten through all of this if Grace hadn't thrown me out of her life. I stared at the table in front of me. There was a packet of sleeping pills that Kelly used and an unopened bottle of American honey whiskey. For the first time in my life, a dark thought occurred to me about what would happen if I drank and took pills. I shook my head. This was not the answer. I just needed some time. The next day, early in the morning, I was served again. This time, it was a restraining order that I not go within 100 meters of Kelly, Grace, John, or Roger, and that I had to leave the house the following Monday. Despite the growing sense of helplessness, what caught my attention was that the restraining order concerned Roger, which was strange. Why Roger? Something clicked in my head. Damn it! I shouted, not addressing anyone in particular. I sent him a text message, thinking nothing of it, filled with rage and what seemed like an open wound in my very soul. "You bastard, this is all your fault. I'm going to beat the crap out of you, but I called myself a friend. I'm going to find you and destroy you." I received nothing in response. However, half an hour later, the same two detectives arrested me again and scolded me for violating the restraining order by contacting Roger. They were not interested in my explanations. They didn't want to listen to my story. They just wanted to put me in jail because in their minds, I was the bad guy. They knew I was supposed to leave home on Sunday and told me I would be charged on Monday. They told me that a detective's car would be parked across the street to watch me for the next 24 hours, and I was strongly advised not to leave the house and just pack my things. Returning to the house, after a more than upset goodbye to two idiot cops, I was tempted to open a bottle of whiskey, 3 drinks in 10 minutes, and I drowned my sorrows. I took out 3 pieces of paper, deciding to write notes to Kelly, Grace, and Myra. I wrote to Kelly about my disappointment in her. I wrote what a traitor she was, and that I hoped that when she died, she would burn long and hard in the pits of hell for what she did to me. I cursed it with every vicious word I could think of, then spat on the paper before folding it and putting it in an envelope. I wrote to Grace about my grief and disappointment, that she did not even ask if I had done what I was accused of. I wrote to her that I had never done anything that I was accused of. I never cheated on her mother and that she cheated on me. I told her that I never stole any money and that she would ever think that I would do something like that, showing that she needs to grow up and see who is feeding her this crap. Then I softened my tone, telling her to love John with everything she had and to think well of me when things calmed down. Finally, I asked her to make sure that Roger would not be the one to walk her down the aisle instead of me, since he had betrayed me. This time, my tears stained the paper as I put the letter back into the envelope. I wrote to Myra and apologized. First, I told her that this situation was not her fault. I then laid out a few things I thought I knew about how Roger had betrayed both of us, and he was the man I believed was now sleeping with my wife. I then explained that I was sorry if I ever embarrassed her with my furtive glances. I meant nothing more than sheepish appreciation for working with such an attractive woman, but I had the deepest respect for her and apologized if my views of her tainted it. Finally, I ended by saying that I felt like I had no way out and asked if she could forgive me one day after her anger subsided. I sealed each letter in separate envelopes and wrote their names on them. Then I grabbed a bottle of whiskey and a bottle of sleeping pills, heading to the bedroom. I sighed as I placed each letter on the bedside table, and then, after thinking, I threw a note under the letters, asking the detectives to look into Roger's finances if they wanted to know the truth. I ended up writing that next time they should do their job and not force an innocent person to do what I was about to do. I walked into the bathroom and took my time taking a luxurious hot shower. I took a couple sips of whiskey, and then, with another sip, I washed down all the sleeping pills. I dried myself, looking in the mirror and wondering why I was doing this. I was never like this, but I had a plan of action, a way out of this mess. If the world doesn't want me anymore, I'll leave it. I was later told that Detective David Roundlight saved my life. He was the one assigned to watch my house that evening from an unmarked car across the street. When Mrs. Hawkins, one of our neighbors, and perhaps one of the few who had no idea what was going on, came to ask about us due to the number of people coming and going that week, Detective Roundlight met her at my front door. When the two of them knocked on the door and received no answer, the detective pushed it open and discovered that it was unlocked. He walked around the house until he found me on the bedroom floor. Moments later, an ambulance was called, and the house turned into a crime scene. Looking back, this was the first break I got all week. I was barely alive when they found me. Under the guidance of a Detective Roundlight, criminologists were brought into the case. They packed whiskey, a bottle of pills, letters, and, after searching the house, found 3 hidden cameras recording to a hard drive, hidden in a linen closet. I didn't know anything about them. I was unconscious for 3 days, and when I woke up, I was surprised to find that I was alive. "Uh, where am I?" I asked the pretty nurse, in a hoarse voice. "You're at Hollywood Private Hospital," she said quietly. Then she put her finger to her lips. "Shh," she said quietly. "Your friend didn't sleep all night and just fell asleep." "Friend?" I asked, raising an eyebrow weakly. "I have no friends. They all abandoned me." "Well, this one didn't," she said, turning my head to see a very disheveled Myra dozing awkwardly in one of those big faux leather chairs you often find in a hospital. "Myra," I said quietly, for some reason feeling relieved to see her. She woke up from her sleep when I said her name. Despite everything, the moment she noticed that my eyes were open, she was already next to me. Her hand slid into mine and wrapped around it. "Bart, what the hell are you doing?" she barked, but her hand held mine very tenderly, and there were tears in her eyes that threatened to fall, although her bloodshot eyes told me that she had been crying a lot lately. I turned away from her. "I thought it would be better this way," I began, shame emanating from me in waves. She snorted. "You think that having done it was the only way to escape? Bartholomew another? I've known you for over 10 years. I've never seen you give up so easily." "What were you thinking?" She repeated her question. We were silent for several minutes. The only sound was the beeping of the cars as she waited for my answer. "Myra, I'm sorry. Everyone. When Kelly, then you, then Grace. I couldn't stand it. I've never done any of this, but no one even asked me about it. I felt like I was backed into a corner. My wife told me to go die. My daughter told me I was dead to her. My friend betrayed me. I hurt you and disappointed you. I do not think so. I got drunk and in a moment of weakness I did something that made sense to me at that moment. I shouldn't be here," I said sadly. She nodded and carefully sat down on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry too, Bart," she said quietly, her own tears threatening to appear. "I was angry and upset. I didn't stop for a minute to think that you were innocent." I was wrong. "It's okay, Myra." She shushed me. "No, it's wrong, Bart, that you're here and that you feel like I'm one of those people that made you do this. I don't know if I can forgive myself." This time, she cried. "It's okay, Myra. It's okay." I closed my eyes tiredly. For the next few minutes, we didn't say anything. However, Myra did not let me go from her hand. We ended up being disturbed by a doctor before either of us could think of anything to say. He smiled, looking at my map as I opened my eyes. "Well, Mr. Other, it's good to see that you're awake. How are you feeling?" I shrugged. "Alive." "I didn't expect this." He frowned, and Myra did the same. "Well, let's see if we can keep you like this," he said, downplaying my painful comment. Over the next few minutes, he examined me. Myra stood aside and watched. "A detective who wanted to meet you when you woke up. He's been here a couple of times. Miss Brown was talking to him." He finished, nodding to Myra. I looked down at the bed when he finished. He repeated his warning to continue to rest and not move. He left Myra and me alone. I couldn't look at her. "So, I'm guessing you're here because of my letter?" I asked. She shook her head. "I haven't seen the letter yet, although Detective Roundlight told me about him." More tears threatened to break out. "My cousin works here in the administration and found your name on the intensive care list. He called me and said that they had brought you," Myra said, almost. I still couldn't look at her without feeling anything but shame. Myra shuddered, but continued speaking. "I was already feeling depressed, Bart. After I left, I was still so angry, but deep down I felt that you had nothing to do with this scam. I've been your assistant for years. If anyone knew you could do something like try to steal money, it would be me. But I had to stop for a moment, no matter how angry I was. If I had done this, I would have realized that you were set up. When my cousin Morris called me and told me, he told me you were here, I just knew that you didn't do those terrible things. I'm so sorry, Bart. So deeply and truly sorry." Myra sobbed, her head falling onto my chest. I felt her tears seeping through the hospital gown. I heard her whisper that she was constantly sorry, that she almost lost her best friend. After a few minutes, she stood up and sheepishly wiped her face. This time, when she tried to pull her hand away from mine to wipe her eyes, I held her and didn't let go. Then she took the other handkerchief with her free hand, carefully wiped the tears from my own eyes, and smiled shyly. Myra took a deep breath. When I thought about it more and more, I couldn't understand how you could do something like that. You always loved your job, but when Roger showed me the signed documents, I was so angry with you. She felt me tense at Roger's name, and then tried to look away. It was him, wasn't it? Roger set you up, didn't he? She asked quietly. I nodded. I think yes. I can't prove it, but it looks like it. The way he didn't tell us about the coast overruns, the way he just randomly signed documents that I never saw completed. I also think he's having an affair with Kelly. I stopped. My eyes were closed. Myra's hand was still in mine. I'm sorry too, Myra. I never thought Roger or Kelly would hurt you. But I can't help it. All the evidence is against me. I cannot prove my innocence. That's why I did what I did. I let the words fade, and for a moment, nothing was said until a new, unfamiliar voice entered the conversation. Well, I know you couldn't. They did a pretty good job of setting you up, forging your signature, and making it seem like you were a crime lord. But criminals who get away with hundreds of thousands of dollars don't behave like you. The man who entered the room was a large, very fit guy. He looked like he'd played rugby and carried himself with the confidence I thought I used to have. Mr. Different, I'm Detective David Roundlight. It was I, along with your neighbor Mrs. Hawkins, who found you. I'm glad to see that you are feeling better. I shrugged. Sorry, Detective, but I'm sure you'll arrest me in a few days when I'm discharged, I replied, with some bitterness. I felt Myra's hand squeeze mine. About that, said the detective, Roundlight. Myra and I looked at him. He raised his hand and ran it through his hair. Now I have been entrusted with your case. I understand everything, and several points do not add up. Would you like to be interrogated again? I think yes. I mean, do I have anything left to lose? I answered the police detective categorically. How about he hire a lawyer? Myra suddenly asked. Shouldn't he have a lawyer? The detective sighed. Yes, he can hire a lawyer. We shouldn't say anything while he's gone. Well, yeah, he should probably hire a lawyer. Myra nodded. She turned to me. Bart, I'll take care of it. She apologized, letting go of my hand for only the second time since I woke up. As she left the room, dialing a number on her phone, the detective and I watched her. She may have been mad at me for what I did, but she was still a walking dream, and both of us, pure-blood men, knew it. She likes you, the detective said. Roundlight. I laughed. She's been working for me for 10 years. We've both had a pretty rough week, so she's a little protective of me right now. I think it's a little more than that. Unofficially, I read your letters and talk to her. She will be a little devil for your wife if she ever ends up in the same room with her. He looked at the door through which she went out. She cares about you very much, Mr. Other, and right now, I think you could use a few people on your side. Detective? I said, giving him a questioning look. He looked at me. I don't know if you should tell me this. After all, I am the one you are examining. He grinned. That's true, Mr. Other. But I think there's more to your case than those other two idiots you met thought. Besides, I heard your comments on the way here. You believe you are innocent, don't you? He asked. Except that I had an encounter with dumbasses and did it to myself. Of course I'm innocent. I would never steal money from an establishment where I enjoyed working. So what? He asked when Myra returned to the room. My second cousin, Reagan Brown, will represent Bart, she said, as if nothing had happened. Detective Roundlight smiled and handed Myra a business card. I know Miss Brown. She is a good lawyer. She will take care of you, Mr. Different. He looked at Myra. Have your second cousin contact me as soon as Mr. Different and she talk. The sooner, the better. The three of us talked for a couple more minutes before he left. "That was unusual," I commented when he left. "Yeah, usually the police shouldn't be so friendly or on your side," Myra agreed. We spent a couple more awkward minutes, and I started a new topic. "Who's looking after Tilly if you're here?" "At the moment, she is with my mother. Oh, and—" She went to her purse and pulled out a drawing. "Tilly drew this for you." She smiled as she handed it to me. It was a folded piece of paper that Tilly had drawn on. It was a photograph of a hospital with an ambulance. On the inside of the building, she drew a pencil drawing of me in bed with the words, "Get well soon," written in the handwriting of an 11-year-old girl. I had to wipe away a couple of tears. "Thank you," I said hoarsely. "Have you heard anything from Grace?" Myra shook her head. "No. I tried to call her several times. I left a couple of messages, but nothing," she said sadly. We talked quietly for about 45 minutes before Myra's second cousin, Reagan, appeared. After the show, Myra excused herself and left me with Reagan. Like Myra, Reagan was a beautiful woman. She had sandy brown hair, not platinum like Myra's, but you could tell they were related if you saw them standing next to each other. "She likes you. It's always been that way," Reagan said at one point during our discussion. Just like when Detective Roundlight told me this earlier, I snorted. "She knows me and has worked for me for many years," I answered. This time, Regan snorted. "Men, what do you understand?" I laughed. "I think I have a future ex-wife who has proven that I don't even have a clue," I replied, humorless in my laughter. She smiled sadly. "Do not worry about it. I received an initial report and spoke with a detective. Roundlight on the way here. Surprisingly, he's on your side. I also have a few theories about what's going on with you, so now that we've talked, leave it to me. Your only crime here is that you loved and trusted someone that you probably shouldn't have." Reagan gave me a pitiful look as she looked at my bandages. "Sorry, Bart. I've heard a lot about you over the years from Myra. She respects you very much, and from what little I know about this past week, she is much more devastated by the way she treated you than by the fact that she lost her job. She cares about you very much." I started to formulate a question, but she raised her hand. "Don't worry, Bart," Regan told me. "I will represent you both at your old job for unfair dismissal. There are a lot of dominoes that will fall very quickly if I'm right. But as for you, now, in addition to recovery, I need the divorce petition that your ex-wife gave you. So since I represent you, what do you want?" My face darkened. "I want as much as possible," I said very quietly. The hidden anger in my voice was not lost on Reagan. "Kelly and Roger made a mockery of me, and most likely by pinning it on me, they got away with stealing most of the firm's money. You have every power to rain down absolute and utter destruction upon them." She laughed, then winked. "Take no prisoners and don't worry about the body count." Understood. I liked my new lawyer. Reagan spent some more time with me. She asked a few more questions about preparing for my self-harm event, as she called it, and then said goodbye, letting me know everything was fine. Reagan let me know that she would likely contact me in a couple of days, if nothing else happened, to conduct a formal police interview upon my release. The next couple of days were quite disappointing after my last week. I was practically lying in a hospital bed, and every few hours doctors and nurses examined me. I didn't have a phone. He was still at home, so I couldn't call anyone, although I didn't think anyone would want to talk to me. But when Myra came the next day, she brought me an old paperback book, Endymion, by Dan Simmons. I laughed when she gave it to me. This was a book I read many years ago and really enjoyed. When Myra handed it to me and sat down on the chair next to my bed and took out her book, Pride and Prejudice, I asked what she was doing there. "Foolish man, I'm here to look after you," was her answer. She shook her head, but smiled. We chatted and talked about what happened to us during the day. With the doctor's approval, she came out at lunchtime and brought me a roast beef roll with gravy and fried potatoes, and herself a chicken roll. Despite the pain, I began to feel like myself again. On the second day, Myra was out all morning, but came in mid-afternoon, just as the doctors removed the IV from my arm and let me know that I would be discharged tomorrow morning if my blood tests came back clean. I looked at Myra. I don't know where to go. I don't even have a phone or wallet to rent a hotel room. I know I can't go home. Myra smiled. Speaking of the house, Regan obtained a court order to remove some of your personal belongings. I was able to take your phone, wallet, several changes of clothes, your laptop, your iPad, and your shaving supplies. Myra, I stated, stunned that she would do this for me. Thank you. Now I can at least try to find a hotel somewhere. I looked at her, my only friend in the world. What? I asked, seeing the worried expression on her face. She hesitated. You were right about Roger and Kelly. She paused again. When Regan and I and the officer came to pick up your things, they were both there, in a rather undressed state. It seems they lived together and did not expect guests. I'm really sorry, Bart, she said quietly. I sighed. It's okay, Mira. Well, no, that's not true. But thank you for being honest with me. What happened when they saw you? She smiled again in response to this question. At first they started screaming, telling me I had to get out, until the officer told them to move away, or they would be arrested for violating a court order. Then the officer let me into your room to take your things. Myra began to cry. Erase the stain. She took a deep breath. It's still there. If I hadn't been here with you since you were brought here, I would have panicked. Will you never do anything like that again? I raised my hands. I promise, I answered. The next day, after I showered, shaved, and left the hospital, Myra met me and we went out together. She grabbed my hand and pulled me towards her car as we walked. We drove for a few minutes until we reached a few condominiums around Kings Park. Myra, what are we doing here? I can't stay with you, I said, realizing where we were going. Of course you can, silly. You don't need to spend money on a hotel. You can stay in the guest room for a few days. Also, Regan will meet us here this afternoon. She's got everything on her mind about your case, so I don't think you'll want to miss it, Myra told me with a smile. Over the years, I have visited Myra several times. It was a small 2-story house with 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a modest kitchen, and a modest living room. Since there were only Myra and Tilly, who were visited from time to time by her mother, and they were quite self-sufficient, they fit in well in this place. After working with Myra for so long, I knew she only had a small mortgage left on her house. Despite her looks, Myra was not a party girl, and I know she doted on Tilly, and that's where most of her money went. We wheeled my suitcases into her house. She then showed me the spare bedroom, closet and everything before Regan showed up. Regan showed up about an hour later. She came in and sat down, taking several folders out of her bag, with a business-like expression on her face. You, Bartholomew Another, are a very, very happy person, she said seriously. I swallowed. Your wife and your best friend almost got away with cheating on you and walking away with everything. Right now I have to tell you that your bank accounts are frozen. This includes your savings accounts and the account that received the missing money. This account was opened in your name, fraudulently. Myra and I looked at each other. Regan continued. It appears that over the past few months, your so-called friend Roger has learned to forge your signature, and then a couple of months ago, he and your wife walked into a local bank and opened an account in your name. I managed to get a video recording that proves it was them. In addition, I petitioned to have their passports suspended and sued them for fraud and mental cruelty. They are in big trouble, my lawyer told Myra and me, smiling. She continued, I have also started legal proceedings against your former firm for unfair dismissal of both of you, and I think everything should be ready by the end of the week. I talked to the detective Roundlight, so tomorrow morning, we'll go and he'll conduct your formal interrogation. She looked at me. It will be a normal action. Just follow my example and everything will be fine. I expect that your wife and friend will be arrested very soon. Over the next hour, the 3 of us discussed details and signed a number of documents. Regan knew that all charges against me would be dropped the next day. After she left, I took a few minutes to unpack some clothes in my room and take my toiletries to the bathroom. Mira and I spent the entire day discussing what we thought would happen next. Then, when Myra left to pick Tilly up from school, I turned on my phone for the first time in days. What greeted me was a mixture of missed calls and text messages, mostly from Kelly telling me how pathetic I was and that I just needed to sign the divorce before I ended up in jail. What was interesting was that over the past 2 days, I had several missed calls from my former company asking me to call them back as soon as possible. But to my disappointment, there was no word from Grace. After Myra and Tilly returned home, my worries were forgotten. An 11-year-old girl wanted to tell me everything about her day at school, about what they did, about the friends she played with, about how she told them about me in the hospital and that I would stay with her until it got better. She was full of energy, and I have to admit, I loved it. While Myra prepared dinner, I sat down next to Tilly. We did her homework and then read her school book for reading practice. She was a great reader, and I loved reading with her. Tilly was a mini version of Myra. I knew she would also become a heartbreaker when she got older. She was so playful and innocent that I hoped she would keep it that way for as long as possible. We had dinner and a shower, and then the 3 of us sat down to watch a little TV before bed. Tilly was happy to show me the latest episodes of a children's series called Bluey. It worked for me as an adult, as much as she found it funny. Tilly asked me to tuck the blanket under her and asked me to hug her, so I almost cried. She told me she was so happy that I felt better when she let me go. Okay, I had to dry my eyes after that as I switched places with Myra, who also said goodnight to Tilly. It felt like a lifetime had passed since I had received such unconditional love from someone. The fact that my daughter threw me under the bus still hurt me. Tilly's innocent concern for my feelings was a relief for me from losing touch with Grace. After that, Myra and I sat down on the sofa again and talked. Often she would hold my hand, and when we both went to bed, she would hug me tightly, telling me that everything would be okay. The next day, we went through interrogation and a detective roundlight, and Reagan confirmed that all charges against me were dropped immediately after the interrogation. On the news that evening, there was a story about Kelly and Roger, with warrants out for their arrest on several charges, including fraud and identity theft. At the moment, they have not been found. Later that evening, Grace tried to call me for the first time, but I sent her to voicemail. I wasn't ready to talk to her. The next day was a little bittersweet. I received several calls from Grace and even a couple of messages asking me to call her, but I still wasn't interested in talking to her. It took being cleared for her to take care of me. I was furious. She tossed me aside without a second thought and then ignored Myra's calls while I was in the hospital. Now that it was revealed that she wanted to talk about her mother and Roger's guilt, my daughter could, for a while, eat crow. However, that night, while we were all sleeping, I had a nightmare. I woke up sweating like a pig and screaming at the top of my lungs. Before I knew what was happening, Myra was there, wide-eyed and worried. Even Tilly stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. I put my head in my hands and sobbed, "I'm sorry, so sorry, I can't." Finally, I started to calm down, and they both climbed onto my bed. Myra climbed over me and stayed on one side, while Tilly settled comfortably on the other. I felt Myra wrap her arms around my neck and pull me close. "It's okay, Uncle Bart," said Tilly. "You had a bad dream. Sometimes it happens. Mom and I will stay with you. Go to sleep." I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. After a while, I felt that Tilly had fallen asleep with her little hand on my stomach, but I felt that Myra was looking at me intently. "Are you okay, Bart?" she asked, with genuine concern in her voice, continuing to hug me like a mother would her newly hatched chicks. For a moment, I thought, "No, sorry, Myra. I don't think so. It was a dream from that night." I mean, when I couldn't say it. I think Myra knew what I was talking about because she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek, and then I felt her nuzzle her nose into my neck. "What are we going to do, Bart?" she exclaimed quietly. "This is unfair. You don't deserve this." She cried. Her voice was full of pain and resentment for me. Shh, I told her, hugging her in turn and holding her close, trying not to wake Tilly, who was snoring lightly, clinging to me. We'll figure it out. Everything will be fine. At that moment, I felt like I had found myself again, if that makes sense. Myra's pain and worry about me brought me back to myself for the first time since that night. I held Myra and Tilly close to me until the sun rose and a new day dawned. The next morning, both ladies hugged me tightly. We had breakfast, after which Myra took Tilly to school. I used this time to start looking for a consultant. I needed help. By the time Myra returned, I had already made a couple of calls, explaining to her that I was seeking psychological help. Myra gave me her biggest smile, and then a much more serious smile. "Bart, can we talk about something for a minute?" she asked, leading me to the sofa, and we both sat down. I looked at her for a moment, then nodded, thinking I knew what she wanted to talk about. "It's okay, Myra," I said. "I understand. Last night was scary. With Tilly here, it's not very healthy. If I wake up screaming again, I'll find another place." Her eyes widened, and she quickly placed her hands on mine, a panicked expression flashing across her face. "No, Bart, that's not what I wanted to talk to you about," she said, then took a deep breath. "Actually, it's quite the opposite, Bart. I don't know how to say this, but I just need—" I looked at Myra. The expression on her face was actually beautiful, but perplexing. "Bart, I'm in love with you," Myra suddenly blurted out. "Think about how you will be shocked by information that comes at a time when you did not expect it." "Sorry? I said that like a stupid idiot." "I said I was in love with you." "I've been in love for a long time," she repeated, this time more modestly and blushing slightly. I leaned back on the sofa, and she smiled meekly, searching my face for my thoughts. "Sorry, Bart, but I can't hold back any longer," Myra told me as I thought about her words. "When I heard that you were in the hospital, I was scared. I couldn't get there fast enough. I felt so guilty taking it out on you, telling myself that I wouldn't tell you anything about how I really felt, but you almost died. Your wife and best friend just deceived you, and when you got out, you came here. So I felt like I didn't need to say anything because you were here with me and Tilly. I thought you would understand this sooner or later. But Myra, why are you telling me what caused this?" I asked. She laughed quietly, but there was a little sadness in her laughter. You stupid idiot! Something happened last night that hurt you. It broke my heart to see you like this, but I have to be there for you so you can fall asleep in my arms. I'd like to think I can lighten your burden. I was rooting for you. I just can't. Bart, I don't want to hold back anymore." Myra's eyes quickly darted to me. "As for why it was always you, haven't you ever noticed that I don't go on dates?" she said, tilting her head to the side. "Yes," I answered, tilting my head slightly to the side in question. "But I always assumed it was because of Tilly?" I said. "That's part of it," Myra said hesitantly. "But Bart, I just never could find anyone who could compare with you." I tilted my head questioningly to the other side. Myra smiled. "Look," she said, "from the moment I started working with you, you have never treated me any differently than anyone else. Instead, you spent your time explaining everything. You were kind to everyone, helping people learn from their mistakes. Whenever you met Tilly, you were friendly and made her feel special, like helping her with her homework or reading with her. She never met her father. However, she sees you as a father figure. Look how she climbed in on you last night because she knew you were hurting." "But Myra—" I stared at her. She raised her hand to interrupt him. "When everything was thrown at us last week, you tried to take it upon yourself. You didn't scream and yell. You didn't treat me cruelly when I threw a tantrum and slapped you." Myra blushed. "You are an amazing person, Bartholomew another. I love you for this and many other reasons. And if Kelly is stupid enough to leave you, then I'm going to take you back, giving you so much love that in a month you won't remember the bitch's name." She came over and kissed me. After a few moments, I kissed her back, hugging her. Time seemed to stand still. "Will you take me, Bart? Will you make me your woman?" Myra asked, and her gaze turned into the look of a seductress. I just got proposed to by one of the sexiest women I've ever met. If I were honest with myself, I would admit that I have fantasized about her in the past. Now I have this opportunity, but events developed quickly. I knew that nothing would ever happen between Kelly and me. And Myra's revelation that she was in love with me was significant in the sense that it made me feel like I wasn't such a loser, but I was afraid that it might also be a consolation. I think Myra understood my inner turmoil, but she didn't say anything. She stood up, took my hand, and led me to her bedroom. We made love. After this, we fell asleep. While sleeping, I had a dream similar to the previous one. We woke up to the sound of the alarm clock. I was shaking and sweating, but not screaming, wrapped in Myra's arms. While we were getting dressed, I described my dream to her. Myra had a worried expression on her face, and she took me with her when she went to pick Tilly up from school. This took another couple of weeks. Roger and Kelly had already been arrested and were being held in custody. They got wind that the police wanted to question them after the charges against me were dropped. They drove from Perth to Adelaide in a panic and were detained by Australian customs as they tried to leave the country. It took 2 months before the Western Australian police moved them to Perth, but I have to say that during that time my relationship with Myra grew by leaps and bounds. After that first night, I moved into her bedroom, now our bedroom, and I have to admit, I felt like I was 20 again. I think it's pretty obvious that I fell in love with this woman. When the police brought Roger and Kelly back to Perth, I noted that Myra was right. I could barely remember Kelly, and I didn't want to save these memories. Like me, Myra has only ever been with one person, her loser boyfriend. A month after Roger and Kelly were brought to Perth, Myra, Regan, and I found ourselves in a courtroom as witnesses against them. Roger never looked at me directly, even when I was in the witness box. As a result, he was sentenced to 15 years. Kelly, on the other hand, couldn't stop staring at me the entire time. During the trial, it was revealed that Roger was the mastermind behind it all. It was he who seduced Kelly and pushed her into cheating, so everyone was surprised when Kelly received 20 years. She was found to be an accomplice in the fraud, but when charges of mental abuse were also brought against her for her actions against me, she was given an additional 5 years. With evidence found on the hidden cameras Kelly installed on Roger, the judge also granted our divorce immediately after the verdict. Regan protested the division of our savings specified in the divorce papers that Kelly had prepared. Regan also stated that I was willing to sell the house and immediately split the proceeds because I had no intention of staying in a house where such terrible things were happening. Finally, Regan also told the court that I am willing to serve as trustee of Kelly's funds until she finishes serving her sentence. It took a lot of effort on Regan's part to convince me to agree to this. It showed that I was willing to put up with some obstacles and went a long way toward stopping Kelly's lawyer from fighting over the stupid things they often do in divorces. I was not allowed to use Kelly's funds, but I could invest them along with any funds I had invested. The courts ruled that Roger and Kelly were to be immediately sent to serve their sentences, and in his closing statement after the ruling, Kelly's lawyer asked me to spend an hour with her before she was sent to prison. After several minutes of hesitation, feeling the eyes of the entire court on me, I agreed. Kelly was still in her court attire when she was brought into the interview room just after the court was dismissed. The room was fairly well furnished, although the table was screwed down and there were chains on the legs of the chairs to prevent them from being thrown. When Kelly sat down, she looked depressed and broken, just as I felt at her betrayal. Her shoulders were slumped. Unlike in the courtroom, she didn't look me in the eye. Her prison guard told us she would be right outside the door, just knock when we were done. There was no real rush. For several minutes, neither of us said anything. It was the first time we had been in the same room since Kelly told me to do something that I ended up trying to do. "Sorry, Bart," she said quietly, looking at her hands. I was a little surprised that she spoke first and that her first words were an apology. The words she said were clearly on the opposite end of the spectrum. "Are you sure, Kelly?" I asked, letting a hint of bitterness creep into my tone. She looked at me, tears appeared, but did not fall. "Yes, Bart, I'm very sorry. I wanted to respond and reject her apology, but she did the classic raised hand in pause, so I held my tongue and waited. Please, Bart, let me talk about this and then you can scold me, Kelly said sadly. I leaned back in my chair and motioned for her to continue. Thank you, she said repentantly, looking me straight in the eyes for the first time since she entered the room. Believe it or not, Bart, I'm very sorry. I don't know what happened to me then. I've loved you for so many years. I still love you even though I've done such terrible things. But what's even worse is that I knew how much you loved me. You were the perfect husband and lover, but one day I woke up feeling, I don't know, lost. She looked away from me, back down to her hands, then continued talking. So maybe a few weeks after I first started feeling lost, things started to get out of control. I was starting to worry about you because you still loved me, even though I felt like I was wrong. Roger was working on this damn project with you when he noticed something was wrong with me. She started wringing her hands. It took about another month before we started our romance. Roger was persistent. He knew which buttons to press. I still loved you, but he knew how to play on my insecurities and get me into bed. After that, he used my guilt to put his plan into action. See, I don't think you ever knew it, but Roger has always been jealous of your ability to lead. He always felt like he was second fiddle to you, and it irritated him. He came up with an idea to make the client pay a lot of money for something that never happened, and make it look like you were stealing money from the company. To my shame, we both conspired against you, setting everything in motion. We opened a new bank account in your name and made sure you were broke, step by step. We both knew that you loved me and trusted me without question, and Roger knew that by the time things calmed down, and with you in prison, his money, our savings, and the money we stole, we could settle down in another country. And if they ever will find out, we will already be out of reach. Kelly spoke, shaking her head, not believing her own words. For now, I said, trying to hide the anger in my voice, none of you cared that you systematically destroyed me in the process. She nodded sadly. Yes, at first I didn't want to, but Roger was persistent. He broke me down one piece at a time until I agreed, although I was hesitant. For our plan to succeed, you had to be so broken that you couldn't doubt anything. You almost succeeded in this, I said, interrupting her. If it weren't for Detective Roundlight and Myra, you could have gotten away with all this. We were silent for a while. Then Kelly asked quietly, Can I see them? I understood what she meant and slowly placed my hands on the table, palms up. Kelly gasped, and tears began to flow as she looked at my scars. She started to reach for them, but then pulled her hands away. Outwardly, I sat expressionless. Internally, however, I was struggling with a range of emotions, from rage to shame, quickly racing through my mind. What upset me a little was that there was at least an ounce of love there, even after everything this woman put me through. But I hated to admit it. I must have failed to hide my emotions because Kelly looked at me and tensed. I'm sorry, Bart. I'm so sorry. I'm ashamed that I forced you to do it. She paused. I'm going to accept 20 years without appeal. I deserve this after what I did to you. I nodded, glad that she would serve her time without question. She looked at me again. Bart? I looked at Kelly. Just so you know, you've never been a bad lover. You're amazing compared to Roger. I have no excuse for what I did to you that last morning. I was wrong. We were silent for a minute. So you and Myra? She asked questionably. Yes, I answered, a little hesitantly. She smiled faintly. Okay, you know, she loved you for many years, my now ex-wife said, as if nothing had happened. I found out about this recently, I answered. I was surprised by both the passion and pain in her voice, in her next statement. Let her love you, Bart. Let her heal the pain I caused you. Large tears flowed from her eyes, but she continued to look at me. I know that I have no right to advise you anything, but this woman loves you, and unlike me, she would never betray you. She wanted you for many years, and she never made an attempt to seduce you. I failed the first time they tested me. She is everything I am not, my now ex-wife told me sadly. Kelly, I didn't know what to say. "Don't worry," she told me, wiping tears from her face with her sleeve. "I'll be okay. I agreed to your terms. I was surprised that you were so generous as to agree to look after my money while I was in prison. You are a better person than I ever imagined." I sighed. "Kelly, I once loved you more than I think you ever understood. If you had told me how you felt, perhaps we could have avoided everything. But I'm trying my best to forget everything you did to me. But just so you know, I still hold a lot of anger inside me even now. I want to yell at you. I want to take your life for what you told me then. But I can't, Kelly. I'm the one who has to live with it." For a moment, neither of us said a word. "Bart," Kelly said as we looked at each other again, "I'm so sorry for what I did to you. You deserve better from me, and I share the same guilt for pushing you, even more than you do if we're being honest with each other. I will always be ashamed. I saw the letter you wrote, and you were right that I would burn for what I did, but I thank God that you are alive." I clenched my teeth for a minute. The feelings playing in my mind were still strong. How could Kelly say such things now? How could she take responsibility and try to take away the anger and pain I was holding on to? It wasn't fair, so I changed the subject. "I offered to look after your money out of respect for our years together. You will have enough money that when you get out, you can start over if you want," I said, trying to hide my emotions and still failing. Kelly saw through my thinly veiled attempt to hide, but, laughing bitterly, accepted the change of topic. "Most likely. I will be over 60. Hopefully this will be enough to retire." 60 is not that much," I said. "Keep yourself in control and you will be strong in your 80s. We talked for a few more minutes about how she would like to receive information about her funds. This relaxed both of us a little, but I sensed that she wanted to bring up the next topic. "Have you spoken to Grace?" she asked, slightly hesitating. I shook my head. "Grace pretty much told me where to go, that I was dead to her." "She accepted the lies you and your lover fed her as gospel. It was this conversation that broke me." I looked at Kelly, and she winced when she saw the pain and sadness in my eyes. "Kelly, she never asked me if I was guilty. She never gave herself any reason to doubt. She just threw me out without even looking at me. It was right after that call when I stopped and stood up, suddenly turning away so Kelly wouldn't see me crying. If I had turned to look at her while I was crying, I would have seen Kelly crying too. She knew I couldn't tell. Turning my back to Kelly, I continued. "When I was in the hospital, Myra tried to contact her, but nothing. Then, like Kelly earlier, I wiped my face with my sleeve and turned around, sitting back down as Kelly tried to wipe the tears from her face. "Sorry, Bart," Kelly winced. "A lot of it was what Roger and I orchestrated. To my eternal shame, it was planned that we would have Grace turn against you." I nodded. Kelly saw the flash of anger in my eyes as she admitted her actions and hung her head in shame. I was going to make her angry for ruining my relationship with my daughter, but she knew she had done it. Kelly just openly admitted it. "If it makes you feel any better," Kelly said sadly, "Grace threw me out of her life too. I haven't been told off this much since I was a child, but I know I deserve it and more." "Bart," Kelly said suddenly, the sadness in her voice disappearing, replaced by something more urgent. "Our little girl needs you. She is scared and attacks everyone. Right now, she and John are fighting over anything and everything, and you know it's not them today," Kelly said more calmly. "I worry about her. It's my fault, but I can't fix it. I know she feels guilty about how she treated you, but you not talking to her after everything just makes it worse." Kelly hesitated for a moment. "Bart, I know that I have no right to ask you for anything." Kelly paused, looking at me again and continuing to wring her hands. "But could you find the strength to forgive Grace? Our daughter needs at least one of her parents. I know now that even if I hadn't been in prison for a long time, my guilt for what I did to you and for turning Grace against you would have eaten me alive over the next few years. And, in the end, she would still hate me," Kelly snorted. "It will be better. It will be better if you are the one to take her. If you had died, I don't know what she would have done. Please, Bart, for that matter, take care of our daughter, my no ex-wife begged me. Kelly, I took a deep breath and thought about what to say. What you're asking for is hard. You caused me great pain, but you were my wife, not my blood. When Grace told me she never wanted anything to do with me again, that I was dead to her, not even a day had passed since you told me to go die. It hurt more than what you did to me. I want to go back to her. But the pain, Kelly, the pain of what my family did to me, what our daughter did, I don't know how to deal with it. Kelly nodded. I understand, she said sadly, knowing that I was trying, but I still had a lot to go through. She understood how painful it was to be rejected. She was living it now. I sighed, looking at my ex-wife. Look, Kelly, no matter what it takes, I'm going to try hard not to hate you. I am getting professional help, but even with that help, it takes most of what I have inside me not to scream and swear at you. And I won't make any promises about Grace, but I'll think about talking to her soon. She looked broken. Throughout this entire conversation, Kelly seemed to have aged. There was nothing more to say. She stood up. Bart, I know this means nothing to you right now, but I'll say it again. I'm sorry for everything I did to you. I have no excuse, and I know I can never atone for this. I will do my time, and although I may never have it, I will hope that one day you will forgive me. Kelly sniffled again, then looked at me, the lines and wrinkles of age now clearly visible on her face. You may not believe me, but I still love you, and will always love you. I may have lost sight of it for a while, but I still remember. We stood there awkwardly. Tears began to flow from Kelly's eyes again as she walked to the door and knocked. Prison convoy opened it. Kelly stopped and looked at me again. Love Myra, Bart, give her the love that I so stupidly squandered. Live a great life and hold your head high. There are people around you who love you. Never forget that there is always someone who cares enough to help you get back on your feet, even in your darkest moments. I missed it, but I'm proud of you, Bart. You become yourself again. Goodbye, my beautiful man. I will never forget you, Kelly said with regret as she parted. And she left the room. I thought about this conversation. There were no screams. Kelly accepted responsibility and accepted her prison sentence. As I stood up and turned to leave the room, I saw a line of small drops on the tile floor in the direction Kelly had gone. I turned away, mourning for a moment for what once was, then turned and walked the other way. I was led out of the secure area into the public gallery, and my mood immediately improved when I saw Myra standing and waiting for me. Even on such a special occasion, my assistant, who became my girlfriend, looked beautiful. However, her outfit still spoke of her seductiveness as her long blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, back, and just above her waist. She kissed me. Everything went well? She asked. Yes, I answered. It was amazing. I expected a lot of excuses and accusations to be thrown at me, but she took most of the responsibility and showed amazing remorse towards me. What do you think about it? Myra asked me. I thought for a moment, still holding Myra. To be honest, I still have a lot of anger at Roger and at her. But unlike Roger, I feel sorry for her. She knows that she ruined everything in her life and is now paying for it. Apparently, Grace also cut Kelly out of her life for what she did. Myra nodded. She hesitated for a moment. About that? She looked at me for a moment. John and Grace are here. While you were with Kelly, John came up to me and said that they would be at the cafe across the street within the next few hours, if you wanted to talk. He knows how upset you are. They've obviously fought a lot about how Grace treated you. But she's desperate to see you. I took a deep breath and looked at my lover. You think I should talk to her, don't you? I asked. Myra nodded. Yes, my love. There is a pain in your soul that I cannot heal. Only Grace can. And if it helps, I'll go with you. I will be by your side as long as you need. And, she smiled at me, if you need Mama Bear to appear, I will claw her eyes out. I love you, Bart. She spoke as if she ruled the world on my behalf. I leaned over and kissed her. I love you too, Myra. Her eyes widened. This was my first public declaration of love for her. We caught a few glances from people, lawyers, judges, and criminals walking past us. But at that moment, I didn't care. Myra was the only person I could see. Then let's go, I said, and we walked, holding hands, across the street. Entering the cafe, Myra and I immediately noticed my daughter and her fiancé. When we arrived at their table, Grace was torn between wanting to run into the mountains or sweep me off my feet by hugging me. I did the latter. I opened my arms, Grace slid towards me, and a moment later, I felt my shirt become wet as she began to cry. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she repeated over and over again for several minutes. I looked at Myra, who was smiling, and at John, who didn't know where to look. Finally, after a couple of minutes, I moved her away from me and we sat down. We each ordered drinks and something to eat, and I decided it was time to get started. "I just talked to your mother," I said quietly. Grace nodded. "I heard, Dad. I'm sorry, it was just—" I raised my hand, and it was my turn. "I know, Gracie, you're sorry, your mom explained a lot, but you should know what you said, cause I'm in a lot of pain. It hurt more than anyone had ever done before." At that moment, I felt that I had nowhere to go. One of the few people I thought would at least care about me, no matter the circumstances, dumped me without a second thought. However, what hurt me the most was that you didn't even ask if I was guilty. Grace blushed deeply. The embarrassment was clear on her face. "Dad, She straightened her shoulders. "No, I need to say this," she said to herself more than to anyone else. I noticed that John said nothing, but squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Dad, forgive me. I should have given you time to answer. I should have let you explain everything, but I didn't. I can't blame Roger or Mom for my actions, but they told me how badly you screwed up, how you went to jail, how you had an affair." She looked at Myra. "Mom, with Roger's help, kept telling me how deceitful you were. They were irresistible. By the time you called, I was so nervous that I said a lot of things that I regret." John nodded. "I assumed that was most of their arguing. Dad, when Myra left messages about you at the hospital, I thought it was all a trick. I mean, Mom and Roger were still talking bad things about you, and Myra was the one you were in cahoots with." Grace continued to glance between Myra and me. "They said you just wanted attention because Myra was part of your plan. But Dad, it's true that you tried—" She couldn't say the last part. None of us could. "Sorry, Gracie, yes, I was in a very bad situation and did not see any way out." Hearing my confession, Grace burst into tears again, burying her face in her hands. Myra melted next to me, as both her and my emotions threatened to burst out. For several moments, no one said anything. John looked at us. "I don't want to downplay the seriousness, but I would like to give Grace a break and calm down." John looked at us and smiled. "Can I assume that something good came out of everything that happened?" he said, pointing at Myra and I, cuddling together. Grace raised her head, and after a moment, her eyes widened. "Dad, you and Myra?" she asked questionably. "Yes," I nodded, then felt I had to explain. "But it was not an affair, as your mother told you. I never cheated on her. When I woke up in the hospital, Myra was there and refused to leave me. You don't know it, but Myra also bought what Roger and your mother were saying for a while. We made up, and I learned how much this woman loved me." John smiled, and Grace looked at us with wide eyes and then seemed to regain her composure. "Thank you," she turned to Myra. "Thank you for taking my dad and being with him when I had a serious case of idiocy." Myra laughed, and this eased the tension somewhat. Then, over the next few hours, we talked. Sometimes we talked about our trials from a personal point of view, and sometimes as a group. At one point, I even asked Grace to switch places with Myra so my daughter could hug me. I would love to say that this meeting healed all the wounds between us, but it was months before we felt open enough to talk to each other without feeling like we were being too sensitive. However, Grace and I worked at it, gradually rebuilding our father-daughter relationship. Grace even came to see me for counseling several times. My psychiatrist helped us overcome some gaps and issues, such as trust, that we had not been able to resolve since our first meeting in a cafe. One of the difficult sessions was when I asked Grace not to completely cut her mother out of her life. Of course, Kelly was a cunning, conniving bitch, but she paid for it, and despite everything, she was still her mother. She agreed to go and meet her on the condition that I go with her the first time. It was a difficult meeting. Not much was said as there were a lot of hard feelings between the three of us, but Grace really made an effort. The next week, Kelly wrote to me and told me how grateful she was for convincing her. 6 months after everything went wrong, I asked Myra to marry me. I proposed during a family dinner. Tilly and Grace encouraged me and said now was the time. John shook my hand and told me to keep an eye on her. I laughed as he smiled, repeating the same phrase I told him earlier. Soon after, Grace and John tied the knot. With my consent, Myra visited Kelly in prison and asked if she would give her permission to take on the duties of mother of the bride. Kelly appeared to be crying, but gave permission. Tilly was beautiful as a flower girl and told everyone that she was my second daughter. From that moment on, I was no longer Uncle Bart and became a dad. After reconnecting with Grace, I walked her down the aisle and handed her over to her very proud husband. During our father-daughter dance, I felt her press close to me and whisper a prayer of thanks. That night, I felt the last remnants of my reluctance to be around Grace disappear. Grace later even sent a series of photos and a letter thanking Kelly for agreeing to Myra to act in her place. I understand Kelly keeps them on her cell phone. Once the dust settled on the Roger Kelly case, Reagan negotiated a significant settlement on the work front for both Myra and me. For a while, Clarence refused to budge, saying he had done nothing wrong, but a week before our meeting in court, he made an offer, which Reagan rejected. It was low and insulting. Then, 2 days before the trial, he made another offer, which Reagan again rejected, and as a result, Myra received a high 6-figure payout, while I received a nice 7-figure payout. For a multi-million-dollar engineering company, their payout to us was insignificant compared to the damages that a public lawsuit would have cost. However, rumors had already spread, and Clarence's income dropped significantly until he retired and sold the company for less than 30% of what it was worth when I worked there. With the money raised from our settlements with the company, Myra and I founded our own engineering and consulting company. We provided administrative and engineering expertise. Within 6 months, we had 5 people traveling around the country, helping with major engineering projects. What was surprising was that one of our first clients was Peter Pembroke. He invited Myra and me to dinner and apologized to us. Once it all came out, he realized we had all been played, admitting that the project almost failed without my engineering skills coordinating the delivery. After that, every year, Myra and I received an invitation to any significant event in Pembroke, regardless of whether we worked on their projects or not. Peter was a good guy, but he got into a bad situation and wanted to make amends. We also sold Myra's little house and bought a much larger house, just off the road with stunning views of Kings Park. It was an old house with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and we spent over 2 years restoring it. It was a fun time. We only took breaks for a few family celebrations, getting married and celebrating the birth of Grace and Tilly's little brother, Byron. Life got better, although I still had bad dreams from time to time. But Myra was my rock, and was there any time I needed her. More than 10 years later, Byron was no longer a precocious 10-year-old boy. Tilly, following in the footsteps of Aunt Regan, studied at the university to become a lawyer. And it was one lazy Saturday afternoon, Grace and John were sitting with us on the veranda of our house overlooking Kings Park. Byron was playing his box with my 7-year-old grandson, Bruce, and they tried to ignore my 5-year-old granddaughter, Hope, when Grace mentioned her mother. "Dad, this week I received a letter from my mother," she said casually but carefully. Kelly wasn't a taboo topic in the house, but everyone acted with caution when she was mentioned. Over the years, I received several letters from Kelly and even visited her a few times. I knew she was in therapy and had a small community in prison. Even though she still had 8 years left on her sentence, she was respected as a model prisoner. "What did she write?" I asked. Among other things, she told me that she received word that Roger had been released last month, Grace said when everything had quieted down. I was sipping Kraken and Coke. Last month? I asked worriedly. Suddenly, I felt Myra's hand on mine. Did she say anything else? Myra asked Grace. Grace nodded. Yes, she said that he came to see her. Mom says he looked bad. Roger's inner life was not calm, according to the letter. I will visit her next week and find out what happened, but she noted that it was not a peaceful conversation with him. We talked about it for a few more minutes before I excused myself and called David Roundlight. Over the years, he became my friend. Now David headed a team to investigate particularly serious crimes and solved many complex cases that attracted considerable attention from the media. Bart, how are you, my friend? How is your beautiful wife doing? He said friendly, answering my call. I smiled involuntarily. Myra is great. I paused. David, I just found out that Roger has been released. I felt David drop his cheerful demeanor. Yes, I received the report yesterday. I was going to tell you about this at the bowling alley next week, he said. David and I bowled on Tuesday nights on the same team. From what I read in the report, he was given permission to move to Adelaide. Apparently, he managed to get a position in a small company there. During his probationary interview, the committee asked about you and whether he planned to have any contacts. He told them you could rot in hell for ruining his life, but knew he had to leave. As with his record, no one would hire him here in Western Australia. I sighed. Peter continued, The report notes that life in prison was difficult for him. I don't think you'll have any problems with him if that's what you're worried about. Thank you, David. This is what worries me. If I hear anything about him, I'll let you know, I replied, letting out the air I hadn't realized I was holding. Before I returned to the table, we talked for a few minutes about bowling and the upcoming barbecue. As I sat down, Myra looked at me. David? She asked. I nodded. He confirmed that Roger had quit and moved to Adelaide. But of course he hates me to the core. I have to say that the feeling is mutual. I told the family gathered about this. The rest of the day was a bit depressing, but I was with my family, and they made sure I felt supported. That night, I woke up sweating and screaming from the first nightmare I'd had in years. Myra instantly woke up. I was sweating like a pig. Without asking, Myra called my therapist, who was very kind, answering the call at 2 in the morning. Keep in mind, this is why we paid him so much money. I told my dream while Myra cried, tenderly clinging to me with all her might. Although it upset my wife, just saying, it made me feel better. My therapist listened to me talk about the dream, noting that it was most likely caused by the news of Roger's release and the anxiety I felt about everything I had been through since that time, over 13 years ago. We agreed to meet again, and I thanked him for seeing me so early in the morning. Once we were settled back in, Myra checked on Byron, who, oddly enough, was still sleeping. Tilly woke up but headed back to bed when she heard us talking on the phone. She asked her mother to tell me that she loved me. I lay down after going to the bathroom, and Myra snuggled against my chest. Do you really think there will be problems with Roger? Myra asked, slightly worried. No, I don't know, I said. I think he's going to leave and we'll never hear from him. And even if we did, you know we have protection. I alluded to my hunting gear, safely stored in our closet. Myra nodded in the darkness. Well, I'm sorry, my love. That hearing about this made you upset. Are you okay? Sort of, I answered. Unfortunately, I think there will always be a shadow there. I don't think about those days too much anymore, but it will always be a part of me. I squeezed the sexy naked woman who loved me so much. But when I think about those times, I tend to fixate on the beautiful blonde who flew in and saved my life. Myra raised her head and looked at me. I'm serious, my love, I told her. I felt so helpless at the time that I thought I had no other choice but to end it all. I could have done it again if you weren't there when I woke up. I came to the understanding that this wouldn't make it any better. Ignoring what happened will not help you. The best thing I can do is make sure that as many of the people I love are there for me as possible, reminding me of everything I have to be grateful for, and talking to you when I need to, so I don't end up again in that place. Myra nodded. I love you, Bart, she said. I love you too, Myra, I replied. With these words, we fell asleep. Although we did not always live happily ever after, there were both good and not so good days. Yes, there were quarrels and disagreements, there were many nightmares. But through all this, I learned more than anything else. I had the unconditional love of a woman who made everything possible. I had friends who accepted me for who I was, and a family who stood by me through life's storms. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.